I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time. We will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women. Thank you, kids.
Donald Trump just saved women's sports by signing an epic and long overdue executive order banning men from women's sports. This is so important because this election was a referendum on common sense. Common sense border policy, common sense economic policy, common sense foreign policy, and equally as important, common sense social and cultural policy. Democrats ruined the culture with their disastrous and ludicrous woke ideology. And sitting atop that mountain of trash was their radical and anti-scientific gender ideology. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down why this was such an important move and breaking down the left's war on women and children with their harmful transgender indoctrination. But where I want to start is the beautiful moment that Trump signs this executive order, surrounded by young girls in their athletic attire who are thrilled that they no longer have to compete against boys. Watch.
Secret Service is worried about them. If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
Pretty good, huh? I see that. Okay? Good. Now you're going to go out and win those events, right? Nice to see you all. Great going, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you, kids.
Again, this is just common sense. Who in their right mind thinks that girls ought to be competing with boys in sport? You either have to be evil or just crazy. The left claims that they care about women, but openly advocate for men to invade their sports, their personal and private spaces, and even locking women in jails with men who claim that they're women. We'll touch on that one later. The left claims that they're for women's rights, but it seems that the only women's rights that they care about are the right to go and kill your unborn baby. They applaud women losing out on scholarships to men. They applaud men beating women in beauty pageants. If you put on a sombrero, it's cultural appropriation. But if you throw on a wig and some 5-inch stilettos, all of a sudden you're brave and stunning. And this is the problem with the left because they pedestalized victimhood. So on one hand, they'll say women are oppressed and they're victims of the patriarchy. And then someone will swoop in and say, well, I'm a black woman, so now I have 2 victim points. And then someone swoops in, well, I'm a plus-size neurodivergent black woman. Now they have 4 points. And then someone else swoops in who's a trans woman, two-spirited, disabled, neurally divergent woman of color. And then they take all the victim points, and now everything that the Democrat Party does acquiesces to the biggest victim. And it ends up being a race to the bottom. And it's no surprise they're all unhappy when you declare that the most depressed person in the room with the most amount of problems has the most social credit. Again, it's just absent common sense. And here's Trump even saying that it's crazy that he has to even say that he's enacting policies like this and ending child mutilation. Watch.
And last week, I effectively banned the chemical castration and surgical mutilation of minor children. Can you believe I even have to say that? I banned governor, I banned, that's just like, who would ever think we have to even say that? last week I banned. Every day we're ending the extremism of the last 4 years. We have other things that are just as ridiculous, not having to do with the subject, but just as ridiculous. Open borders where people are allowed to pour in from all over the world, from jails and prisons and mental institutions and insane asylums, people that are very sick, people that are very evil, killers, murderers. Many of them murdered more than one person. And we have to justify the fact that we're moving them out. We are moving them out in tremendous numbers. Tom Homan and Christie are doing a fantastic job, and the governor and other governors too. But that we have to even fight for this stuff is just incredible.
And he's right. While we should applaud these important executive orders being signed, we should also take a step back and be disgusted at the reality that the Democrats created. Democrats are advocating and celebrating children being surgically mutilated and given life-altering, permanent, sterilizing cross-sex hormones. It sounds like a sick experiment that you would hear taking place in Nazi Germany. And this is the hill that the Democrats have chosen to die on. Now listen to Trump list some of these instances of men breaking women's records. And tell me, how is this fair at all?
Men claiming to be girls have stolen more than 3,500 victories, that's a lot, and invaded more than 11,000 competitions designed for women. Last year, a male cyclist posing as a woman competed in the 800-mile Arizona Trail Race, a very big deal in cycling, and obliterated the women's course record by nearly 5.5 hours. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it, huh? 5.5 hours, but you have to hear the weightlifting records. You think that's bad. The weightlifting's worse. In 2023, a man in women's powerlifting broke 2 world records and outlifted his closest female opponent in one event by 440 pounds. And they continue to defend themselves.
Democrats have this cycle that they go through where it starts as a Republican conspiracy theory, and then it turns into, well, it's only happening just a little bit, and then it turns into, okay, it's happening quite a lot, but it's a good thing and you should support it. To give you a perfect example, they said, no children are receiving gender-affirming care and surgical mutilations, and then they'll say, okay, some children are, but it's really not that prevalent. It doesn't happen that often. And then they'll say, okay, we've been exposed. It happens all the time, but it's actually a good thing. Gender-affirming care for children is a great thing. But wait, I thought it didn't happen in the first place. And that's the exact same thing they did with men and women's sports. But a United Nations report came out that showed that over 900 medals have been won by men pretending to be women and taken away from regular women. A Fox report on this article reads, the United Nations released studies finding that nearly 900 biological females have fallen short of the podium because they were beaten out by transgender athletes. The study, titled Violence Against Women and Girls in Sports, said that more than 600 athletes did not medal in more than 400 competitions in 29 different sports, totaling over 890 medals, according to information obtained up to March 30th. The replacement of the female sports category with a mixed-sex category has resulted in an increasing number of female athletes losing opportunities, including medals, when competing against men. Women fought so hard for the right to have their own sports, only for woke Democrats to take that all away from them in the name of giving preference and compassionate treatment to mentally deranged men. Now, a perfect example of this hypocrisy is last year in a Canadian weightlifting competition. A man pretending to be a woman broke the record for the women's power lift. And to prove a point just how ridiculous that is, a full-blown man, just a man's man, declared himself to be a woman and shattered the previous guy's record, and the guy pretending to be a woman was just outraged by this. Watch.
Somebody did show up at the meet today with malicious intent, and you know what? It was nothing. It was just entirely ignored. People lifted. I volunteered. everyone was happy that I was there. And it really struck me that maybe my participation isn't necessarily fair. I mean, there's science, whatever, but people welcome me because I'm actually nice to people. I show up and I try to make everyone happy.
I mean, the delusion behind this is just mind-blowing. It's okay for you, a man, to compete against women and break their records because you're actually pretending to be a woman. But this guy's satirically pretending to be a woman, and so you take offense to him breaking your record. It's offensive to you, but you doing what you did wasn't offensive to women. Again, I don't care about the feelings of a mentally ill man, and most common sense people don't, especially when it means harming women in the process. But because in Democrat politics, they give so much status to the biggest victim, the largest crybaby, they end up demonizing and ostracizing, sometimes even insulting women for standing up for the things they fought so hard for. Now, this next clip that I want to show you is absolute hilarity. So a transgender activist, a man pretending to be a woman, responds to a poll that shows that Americans overwhelmingly don't agree with men being in women's sports. And his answer to why Americans should be okay with it is just downright delusional. Watch.
Recent New York Times Ipsos poll showed only 18% of Americans support transgender women playing in women's sports. What do you say to that?
I think a lot of people don't know trans people in their everyday lives, so they don't know the ins and outs of our experiences. They often just think of us as hypothetical beings out there that are waiting to be the boogeyman in their lives. That's not true, and the Trump administration and really the conservative right have been stoking this ignorance for years, but we're not going to fall for it. I think it's also important for folks to understand that this has never really been about trans people in sports, and particularly trans women and girls in sports. This has always been about trying to erase us from society, from access to healthcare, from access to employment, education, safety, and security. But we're, again, not just going to roll over and allow this to happen. Trans folks and the folks who love us and support us and understand our brilliance are rising up.
First off, all these people are just giant narcissists. It's always me, what I want, how I feel. Accept me, celebrate me, love me, praise me. And besides that whole disgusting aspect of their movement, it's not logical nor rational and simply requires sympathy. They said, well, most Americans don't know a trans person, so if you knew a trans person, maybe you'd be more open to them competing in women's sports. It's the same kind of argument that they give for open borders. Oh, well, if you just knew one of these mothers and their kids and just how badly they wanted to come here and they just don't have a good life back in their home country, you would feel differently. Democrats made compassion and sympathy their main priority because they love to virtue signal. They love to give themselves a pat on the back for being such great, caring people. Even though this fake compassion that they try to lead with ends up causing so much harm. What about the 300,000 kids that went missing under Biden? What about the numerous women who were sexually assaulted and trafficked due to these open border policies? What about these women who literally can't compete with men and lose medals and scholarships? And just the simple satisfaction of achievement, knowing you worked hard to do something, and no matter how hard you try or work, you will not be able to beat this person because they have a biological advantage. And where it gets really repulsive is in the jail system. Under the Biden administration, jails got so woke that they would allow men to just declare that they were women and then get transferred to all-female facilities. A bombshell report came out that showed that 15% of all the women in the federal prison system are actually men. And the studies show that an overwhelming amount of women in prison have experienced some sort of sexual or physical assault by a man. So they are forcing biological women who are oftentimes victims of assault by men to be locked in a cage with criminal men. Listen to a California official explain just how bad this is and how often it gets abused by men?
There is some type of review process, but it is based on the individual's self-declared gender identity. These individuals don't have to be identifying as transgender or non-binary prior to being convicted and entering prison. It is based on their self-declared gender identity. And I will note that many female inmates we have talked to tell us once they gain access to women's prisons behind closed doors, they are no longer identifying as transgender. They are embracing their natural male identity.
Is this primarily an issue in California, or does your organization get reports from other states?
It is certainly the most pervasive in California, since California was on the forefront, one of the first states in the country to pass this state law. But the BOP also generally recommends housing inmates based on their gender identity. There is, again, a review process there.
Wait, you say the BOPs, that's the federal prison
Bureau
system?
of Prison. Under the Biden-Harris administration, they ordered federal prisons to recognize trans-identified inmates' health and safety when making housing decisions, and even declared for the first time that gender-affirming surgery may be medically appropriate, which means taxpayers would be funding it.
This is the absence of common sense that so many Americans rejected in this election. How in the world can you say that you are for women and also advocate for policies like this? And it's obviously no surprise that these men pretending to be women end up committing acts of sexual violence against these women. That's how you end up getting a massive surge of women in prisons becoming pregnant. And then in these reports, these liberal media outlets will refer to the man as an actual woman. So the story ends up reading, she got her pregnant. It would almost be funny if it wasn't so dangerous. And the response from the left will always be, well, not all men identifying as women are these predators. Well, sure, maybe not all of them are. But if you have a policy that lets the predators exploit a loophole so easily that they can now be locked in cells with women, don't you think they're going to take that? Democrats will say, oh, men are so evil and they're so dangerous to women, but then advocate for those same dangerous men to get into the most private and vulnerable spaces with women by simply just declaring that they're a woman. None of it makes sense. It's sickening. It's wrong. And I am ecstatic that President Trump is taking the steps to get rid of this perverse trans ideology from our society. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.